Hello, algebra students. Well, we're looking at the quadratic formula today. And this is another way to solve quadratic equations. So, this is it. Um, Kind of a big, messy, complicated looking thing, but it's really not so bad. And we can use it to solve a quadratic equation that's in this form. It has to be set to 0. And this is an alternate way of solving quadratic equations. What we've done before is we factored them and solved them that way, but that only works for equations that can be factored. Some equations cannot be factored. And so this quadratic formula will work for those. It will work for all quadratic equations, whether they can be factored or not. So let's look at the first example. It says solve using the quadratic formula. And there it is. And this is in standard form and it is set to 0. So all we have to do first is make sure that we recognize what the a, b, and c is that's going to go into the quadratic formula. So a is whatever's multiplied by x squared, right? There it is, ax squared. So in this case, that's 2. So we can write that down. And you don't have to write this down, but it's kind of helpful, especially at first. Make sure you identify what everything is. And we need to know what b is. Well, b is the thing that's times x. So in this case, that's 3, right? b equals 3, and then c is the thing that's called the constant term. It's not times anything, and in this case that's negative 5. Okay, so c equals negative 5. So we've got everything, and now we just plug in to the quadratic formula. Okay, so I will first write it down, the formula again, right under here. So we plug in to this formula, and we will get our value of x here. So here's the formula. And we plug everything in. So b was 3, so negative b is negative 3 plus or minus. And we have the square root of b squared, so that's 9 squared. I'm sorry, not 9 squared, 9. But I'll tell you what, I'll first write it down as 3 squared. 3 squared minus 4ac. 4 times a is 2, c is negative 5. And that is all over 2 times a, and a again is 2. Okay, so far so good. We've got everything plugged in. Scroll this up. Now we just simplify all this. Okay, so that's negative 3 plus or minus. We've got this square root here. So 3 squared is 9. And now this is going to be a negative times a negative, and that so it'll be positive. 4 times 2 is 8. And again, that's negative 8 times negative 5, so it's going to be positive 40. And in the bottom, we just have 4. Okay, so we're almost there. Square root of 49 over 4. And the square root of 49 is 7. So that's it. But we are going to plug this, we're going to split it up, to get two answers. There's a plus or minus there. Okay, so we split that into one solution we could call x sub 1 equals the negative 3 plus 7 over 4, and the other one we could call x sub 2 equals negative 3 minus 7 over 4. Okay, that's where the plus or minus comes in right here. We split it into those two possibilities, two solutions. So we just simplify. X sub 1 equals, let's see, negative 3 plus 7, that's 4, over 4, and so x sub 1 equals 1. Okay, x sub 2, negative 3 minus 7, that's negative 10 over 4. So we will simplify that to negative 5 halves. And that is it. That's our two solutions. Okay. So let's look at the next one. Solve using the quadratic formula. There's an equation. This one is not in standard form. It is not set to 0, right, as it is right there. So that's the first thing we have to do. This has to have 0 on the right side of the equation. So we will subtract, let's see. Yeah, subtract 8 from both sides because we need 0 on the right. So on the left, that gives us 2x squared minus 4x minus 16. And on the right, it does give us 0. So now we're ready to go. Just like last time, we'll make sure we know what those variables are, or what the a, b, and c are, that is. So a is the thing that is multiplied by x squared. So that's 2. B is the thing that's multiplied by x, and that's negative 4. And C is the other number that's not multiplied by x at all, or x squared, or anything, and that's negative 16 right here. Make sure you don't go back and look at the original one, because that's not the right one. It has to be the one in the equation that you have set to 0. Okay, so, whoops, I wrote negative 6. I should have said negative 16. Let's see, fix that. Okay, so we've got our a, b, and c. We'll plug them into the quadratic formula. So I have, I'll write down the formula again here. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus four AC. That's all over 2a. So we plug everything in. So negative b is the negative of negative 4. So watch those minus signs. B itself is negative 4. Okay, so negative b is negative of negative 4. B squared will be that negative 4 squared. Then minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 16. So just plug it in exactly. Divided by 2a, so 2 times 2. Okay, so let's go about simplifying everything. So negative of negative 4 is positive 4. what goes under that radical? Our negative 4 squared right there. Well, that's going to be 16, right? And again, this will be a negative times a negative, so the 4ac part is negative 8 times negative 16, so that's positive 128. The bottom we have 4. So what goes in, what do we get when we calculate that inside that radical? 16 plus 128, that's 144. Okay, we still have 4 on the denominator, so we can simplify that, and the radical is easy this time. Square root of 144 is 12. So that's 4 plus or minus 12 over 4. And we've done the hard part. We have to split that, though, into those two answers. And so we have, I'll just move it over here a little bit to have more, make sure I have enough room. X sub 1 equals 4 plus 12 over 4. X sub 2 equals 4 minus 12 over 4. Okay, so we simplify each of those. X sub 1 equals 16 over 4, and that is 4. X sub 2 equals negative 8 over 4, so that is negative 2. So that's the solutions to that one. Now a couple things to notice here. One is that this one came out to whole numbers, and that means this could have been factored, and we could have solved it that way. But the quadratic formula works, whether they can be factored or not. Another thing to notice is both of these examples, we did not use our skills we've been practicing on lately for radicals, simplifying radicals, or for dealing with the imaginary numbers when you have a negative inside the radical. So in the first one, we had the square root of 49 was 7. That was nice. In the second one, we had the square root of 144, which was just 12. We didn't have to do anything, simplifying the radical. We did simplify the radical, but we didn't have to factor it into primes or anything like that. We just had a radical, we had a number under the radical that was a perfect square. So we just took that square root. And we didn't have negative numbers to deal with imaginary numbers. However, of course, we will. So this was, the simpler ones, and tomorrow we will be getting some situations where we will use some of those other things we've been learning recently. So we will look at those then.